All right, there we go.
So yeah,
All right, so everyone watching, this is Mike from Thepurelife on YouTube. If you guys don't know who he is, you obviously got to go check him out. He does a lot of stuff with centipedes, socialization, everything in that kind of realm. Um, so I mean, yeah, Mike. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about like what you do, what you have been doing? Um,
Well, I free handle centipedes, of course, and I've always kind of had an interest in it. I started out with a pretty serious fear as a child of centipedes, but that was a developed fear based around people telling me, they're going to hurt me or they're dangerous or and all of that. And I got a lot of negativity in the beginning when I started free handling in the early 2000s, like 2004, at least posting my free handling. Um, People didn't like it back then. They would either tell me it's going to hurt the animals are unpredictable, I'm going to hurt myself by holding the centipedes, and stuff like that. And I was kicked off of board after board, and it was crazy. But over time, I kind of showed stuff that people couldn't argue with. I showed videos where I interacted with the centipede, and the centipede acted the same every single time. Um, and that goes along with a video that I had a long time ago called "You Can't Train a Centipede," because I never told anybody or suggested that you can train a centipede to do tricks or anything. Um, but you can certainly socialize them. And I'm sure I've seen some of the stuff that Ben's posted. And
yeah,
I don't know, you said you don't have any centipedes yet, right, KJ? But you
at the
know
moment, I
that,
don't have any.
mhm. Yeah, so just from what
At the
Ben's
moment, I don't
done.
have any, but
Mhm. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, my internet's cutting out.
That's
Um,
okay.
let's see. Can you hear me?
I can hear you
yeah, we
now.
can hear.
Okay.
Yeah, so I
So
know
at the
Ben.
moment, I don't have any centipedes.
Okay.
Sorry, you go. You go.
Okay.
I'll listen.
Yeah, I know Ben has experienced what I'm talking about with centipedes predictability, as you handle them and whatnot. They do act the same every single time. Now, I do tell people you're eventually going to get envenomated if you do want to do this kind of stuff. A lot of people that were negative against me said, "Oh, you're doing it for publicity, or it's like a show or an act or something." And it's the furthest from that for me. It's a passion. It's handling centipedes is like nothing else in this world at
Yeah,
all. They're amazing animals, but that's just a little touch on
They are.
how I feel about the handling centipedes and what I'm doing.
yeah. KJ will know I'm actually extremely new to socialization. Um, one of these species I socialized first, I started off with a Dahania yellowleg,
Okay.
Fluffy, who's currently on eggs. But yeah, and sure enough, I got bitten, but it wasn't as bad as people make it out to be. Um, since then, I've socialized a few species, mainly Asian species, Scolopendra subspinipes, Scolopendra, Dahani, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, but this has been my new specimen I've been working with. This is my white leg. Um, at first, I was actually extremely skeptical with these. Uh, they're they're pretty expensive here. I thought, is it really worth it? But honestly, they're unlike any centipede I've ever interacted with. Um, they're big, they're strong, and it's almost as if they're actually clever compared to the normal centipede type of behavior. Oh
Right.
wait,
Yeah,
For
that's
me,
quite interesting. Oh, go ahead, KJ.
I started about 6 years ago. My first specimen I started socializing was Scolopendra polymorpha. I used to live in Los Angeles. I would find them in my garden. I would go out and look for them and collect them and play with them. And I remember my friend who I always went out with, he would call me crazy and say you're gonna die from them. And like a part of me believed it, but at the same time, I didn't really care. I just kind of did it anyways. And man, at this point, I've taken more Scolopendra polymorpha bites than I could count. And to me, it's really not a big deal. It's just kind of like, okay, they bit me, whatever. Let's do it again. But at this point, I've socialized quite a few species from Scolopendra dahani, Scolopendra species white leg, polymorpha, even smaller stuff, which I enjoy working with, like Rhysida longipes and Hemiscolopendra, cryptops species, Theotops, stuff like that. That's something I'm pretty into. I think they're underrated.
Yeah, I remember you called me nuts for attempting to try and socialize a dahani.
I did. This was a while ago, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to do that. And then I tried it myself, and I was like, okay, they're actually not that bad. They're not as fast as everyone says. And then I got bitten by dahani, and it really was half as bad as everyone said. It hurt. It's not a fun experience, but it's really not that big of a deal.
Now, one thing to keep in mind with envenomations is they hurt in different places differently. You get much different levels of pain. One instance, if you get bit on the upper arm right here, you got a lot of tissue and meat to absorb that venom. Whereas if you get bit right on the tip of your finger here, right underneath the fingernail, there's not a whole lot of tissue there. And so this is going to hurt pretty significantly worse than something like right here. Now, given if you get bit like on your armpit, that's a sensitive area. That's going to really, really hurt. I've gotten envenomations all over, but the same species, it's just really interesting how drastically the pain can be different from one area of your body to another.
Yeah, KJ will remember my first dahani bite was actually in my nose. And that bled for a while. It wasn't the most pleasant at all.
No. Yeah, it's eye-opening, those dahani envenomations, man. I'll tell you what. And sometimes they'll just do it for absolutely no reason. It'll be chill, just walking around, and then boom, it's done. I've heard a lot of people getting bit on the face, though. There was this guy back in the early 2000s when the first Hynanum came into the U.S., and he was big on a lot of tarantulas, and he'd always tell me how hot his what's called baboon tarantulas were, and I believed him, whatever. But he put a Hynanum on his face, which is something you haven't seen me ever do. I don't really do the centipedes on the face because I've gotten accidental bites on their face, not from putting them on my face. I'll tell that story later. But yeah, it bit him, and he disliked centipedes so bad after that he never kept Hynanum again. Given Hynanum's pretty nasty, but yeah, there was pictures. His whole face was swollen. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, Hynanum are definitely up there when it comes to those really high venomous centipedes. I think like Hynanum, you have the Malay tigers or the Ryu giants. Mm-hmm. You have the Spinosissoma. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong.
Spinosissoma.
I feel like those three. Yeah, I feel like those three are kind of at the top,
Mm-hmm. I will say, out of all the venom I felt, the Ryu, the actual Ryu specimen that came out of the Ryu Islands in Indonesia, that was a very, very hot centipede. That hurt extremely bad even after years of SI. Now, one that's seriously underrated, but I think it's only underrated because like 4 or 5 enter the hobby and no more, is the Ethmostigmus that came out of India, not the one from Africa. They're selling those African one as the Indian one, and it's not the same thing. The Indian Ethmostigmus bit me on accident because I was pulling it out of a container, and I had it on moss, and it kept running back in, so I just put my thumb on the trunk, not very hard, and it turned around and got me. And man, it was terrible. It was absolutely horrible. I've never felt any Ethmostigmus like that.
So that was the Rubripes spinosus, wasn't it?
Yeah, those would be. Yeah, those are nasty. I mean, there's not very many bite reports of those because, like you said, like they're very rare. No one really has them. But I definitely agree they are kind of underrated. But what would you compare them to? Let's say the Rio Giants. Like, which one do you think was worse?
The Giants for sure. I think it simply comes down to venom delivery. I think that the Ethmostigmus probably does have more potent venom, but it can't deliver near the amount of a centipede that's this big with maxillipedes that are as large as a gigantes.
Yeah. I remember seeing that, and
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I remember, I think it was you in the video on YouTube with the Rio Giant getting bitten. And I remember seeing just a few minutes before I'd watched the video where you get bitten by a Dahani at this show. And I'm thinking, if this centipede could do damage to someone that's pretty much immunized, made them immune to Dahani, what could it do to someone else?
Yeah, I had a lot of problems sourcing those centipedes for that exact reason. I had friends in the area that I talked to go ahead and collect stuff for me that would then be sent through my importer rather in California. And they were so reluctant to catch those centipedes. And a lot of them told me horror stories saying, oh, somebody's lost a toe because of these things, and I don't want to get them. But I finally did find one person to get them, and then the contact was gone for years. And then I got another one. And now somebody's bringing them in. I know who's bringing them in to the U.S. and who's exporting them and importing them and getting them here and all that. But he's selling them for a lot of money, man.
Right.
Like, go ahead.
Yeah, didn't Padrig, I think his name is, get like a bunch of babies in?
Yes, he did. One of my close friends in Malaysia actually bred those, and then that's how he got them. So he was looking for those for years. And from what I hear, the tiger actually has a really wide range. It's in Singapore, it's in Malaysia, it's in Indonesia, but they're scattered and they're just not very easy to find in general.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I think I know the guy
they're
in
definitely
Malaysia.
a rarity.
Yeah, they're slowly coming into the hobby in Europe now. Well, they've probably been in the hobby in Europe for a while, just not in the UK hobby. And they've been on my list for a while. Yeah.
There's a new color form. I think it's in the UK. Who, man, I wish I would looked that up before I started this. But there's one I seen, and you guys might have seen it too. It looks like the Ryu, but it has rainbow legs. It's freaking crazy. Have you seen that?
I've seen it. Yeah.
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 I'm almost wondering though if that's like the other Subspinipus and it gets this big, and so it's really brightly colored, but not the same size. Because I've ran into that like more often than not. A long time ago, this guy told me, he's like, I got these super colorful centipedes. He was from Singapore, and he was comparing them to Malaysian jewels. And then I got them when they got here to the U.S., and another guy got them, and the other guy called them lowland jewels. These things, they're dinky little things. They don't get very big. And honestly, their colors are not that impressive. So the lowland jewel, man, that's a centipede that's not for me. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we've got those in the hobby, but they're going for more expensive than the Piece of Lava variants. And I think I know which one I'd rather have.
Yeah, it's probably agreed with across the board by a lot of people. There's a lot of cool Subspinipus I've had over the years. The toxic tip. Those, man, I saw them. The tarantulaspiders.com guy. His name's Todd Gearhart. I've known that guy for a long time. He's not one of my friends. I'm not going to talk bad about the guy. But he said that those just came into the hobby in 2019. Now, I'm sure if anybody's followed me, they've seen my videos and my pictures of those in 2015 or 17.
Yeah, they've been in the hobby for a while, actually.
Yeah, no, I think I did see those.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. There's a lot of
people. Definitely like
Go ahead.
Sorry, it's my internet, man. It keeps
I
delaying.
know. I got you. It's all good.
But there's a lot of. You go. I'll wait.
I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. It's all good. But
Wait.
Oh, he's gone.
No, he's starting over for a second. So anyway, no, there's a lot of people in the hobby that keep saying first time in the hobby and stuff. And that's a sales pitch, you know what I mean? It's kind of a shame. I wish more people were really pressing, these dealers were pressing on getting pairs and selling pairs to people. But unfortunately, I think there's a lot of dealing of centipedes going on where these people sex centipedes and they deliberately send you 2 males or 2 females.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's happened all too often to me in the past.
A lot of people just don't want to bother with sexing as well, or they'll charge extra for actual sex specimens. To me, I'll sex centipedes free of charge if you wanted to, although most of mine are sexed if I do sell them on.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
All right. Yeah, I think the delay is gone.
Okay, good.
But I was talking about the toxic tips, and those were definitely one of my favorite subspinipes variants. I think they're kind of underrated. You know, a lot of people know the word and have seen them, but not a lot of people like want them, and I think that's a little bit sad, you know. But what were you guys talking about while I was gone?
Just people selling on sex specimens even though they're 2 males or 2 females.
Right. I don't think I'd ever fully trust someone with a sex specimen, you know, like unless I'm good friends with them and I know them well. If someone said it's sexed, I'd still sex it myself. I think that's just like the safest way to do it.
100% safest way. You'll end up with dead centipedes if you take somebody's word for it and you put them together. And I learned that the hard way from somebody I trusted a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pain. It's also like sometimes like even if they don't think they're lying, you know, they could just have missexed it. You know, it's not easy to sex centipedes sometimes, especially with certain species. So I think it's always good to just do it yourself. You can see it with your own eyes. And there's been plenty of cases where like I don't know what the sex is, you know, I can't figure it out. So I'll take a photo and ask some other people, and I think there's no problem with that.
Yeah, some people try to follow general cues on centipedes. Like females of a lot of species tend to have shorter antennae. That's not something to use as a 100% sexing method, though, by any means. Even if the antennae on one specimen are way longer, that doesn't mean that they haven't been, you know, ripped off and regrown. So you really don't know on that. Another thing, like the Rio Grande, there's a lot of debate going around about that centipede, and it's probably because of me. Those are sexually dimorphic. The males are much darker orange than the females. The females are a duller yellow color, and that's 100% of the time across the board. Females are also bigger. Now, I've kept a lot of polymorpha, and I've kept a lot of Rio Grande. Let me actually get one of each right now. Give me just a second.
This is going to be odd because a lot of people, the general consensus beforehand was Scolopendra morcitans was the only sexually dimorphic centipede.
Right.
And that was the belief for a while.
Yeah, and
I think it's mainly because. Oh, you can go, but quickly, I think it's mainly because the fact that a lot of centipedes are now coming up. Like, there's a lot of new things being discovered, and as taxonomy advances, like we can learn a lot more and go a lot more into depth. And I think that's probably the main reason. But,
yeah, you know, and people are paying a lot more attention now too that they weren't paying attention in the past. The white legs are clearly sexually dimorphic. And they're basically the same as Rio Grande. Females are generally more robust and a little bigger. The antennae are going to be a lot longer on the males than on the females. And the color is going to be duller on a female, and you get a lot darker colorations on the big males. Now, this isn't a rule to generally follow. You could have different localities that have different colors, of course, but that's something that I've been told by a lot of reputable people, and I've seen myself and my buddy, the Inverts Kingdom, when we were doing or attempting white leg breeding, which unfortunately ended with the eggs being eaten. Um, but we've seen that a lot in our parents. So
That's interesting. A while ago, I think last year, there was a guy on Facebook, and he claimed to be able to sex any white leg just by looking at it. And, back then, like, that was kind of, you know. So I asked him, like, how do you do that? I think, like, how? Explain. And he didn't even say it. It was just like, it's my business secret, which I thought was a little bit ridiculous and kind of bollocks. But
yeah, I got a buddy that can tell pretty damn good, and he's been around as long as me. He's a somewhat, I wouldn't say famous, but known certainly among centipede keepers. His name is Lee, but he's pretty spot on. I've shown him pictures of centipedes, and man, he knows what sex it is. But again, that's one of those things you can't always say for sure. Sex it yourself. I don't care if somebody has experiences themselves or me. If I say I think that's a female, I'm still going to say you better sex that centipede.
for sure, I think, like, because sexing centipedes is such a, I want to say, ordeal. There's so much that goes into it, a lot of thought that goes into it, and the sexing process alone is more work than any invert I know of. So because it has so many steps, I think your best bet is always to just do it yourself. Like, it's great to ask questions and get information before you do it yourself, but like when it comes to the actual process, I think you should just do it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff online about sexing. I just recently released a sexing video, but it's still not as good as I want. I need a camera person to get up close and do this. I do my videos alone, and I pretty much always have. And so it's very difficult to do something like those sexing videos. I've had help here and there with them. But again, getting up close with those and trying to hold the camera and sex the centipede doesn't work alone. So I don't think the content is really good on the internet to show you how to sex centipedes. Even my own content, I think, needs work.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, when I was first starting to sex centipedes and thinking about pairing, I mean, I spent weeks and months on YouTube and online trying to find stuff, and the only information I actually found that was like decent was Facebook. Like, I talked to people like in person, not in person, but I talked to them.
I know what you mean.
And that's pretty much how I learned all my sexing and breeding knowledge. I think it's a pretty good method.
Yeah.
Ask some questions.
Oh, go on.
Facebook groups are a real blessing and a curse. Like, for every good person you find on them, there's like 10 people that will bite your head off.
That's arachnoboards too, and it's always kind of been like that. But way in the past, I'll say when it was early on in like 2004, before my original account was banned from arachnoboards, there was a lot of people that were trying to be helpful. Unfortunately, a lot of the helpful stuff they gave you was garbage. You would have centipedes dying left and right because this was assumption care. White legs were originally sold as a tropical centipede. So there was this mass thing where, you got to keep them super humid, and they like to have a lot of substrate. And so people did that. They said use cocoa fiber. I used to use cocoa fiber. And this is a huge correction to anything that anyone might have heard from me in the past. Just don't use freaking cocoa fiber. There's a few centipedes like polymorpha that I have put with a sand cocoa mix nowadays, but just don't use it in general, because I have had deaths where I actually cut the centipede open and I look for what happened, because when a centipede gets impacted, its body gets really fat in the center, and the back of the body, it looks almost like it starts to die at the very end of the trunk, the last few segments. The sides start to recess in and darken up. That's a great sign that the centipede is impacted. Unfortunately,
Right.
I have not yet done anything to save a centipede from impaction. If I see impaction, it's dead. It's dead within a couple days. But I found the strands from cocoa fiber inside the centipedes.
Yeah, I've
Right.
never
Yeah, I
used
remember.
cocoa fiber. It's ugly. It's not natural. Like, name one species that lives on 100% pure coconut stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
Yeah.
talking to a guy. I know Ben knows him. I don't know if you know him, Mike, but his name is Chris Cox. He's in the UK. And I was talking to him about, cocoa fiber use and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, the first thing he said about it was, don't use it. Centipede's going to get impacted and die. And there's no really treatment for impaction. I mean, with reptiles, you can do things, whether it's surgery or flushing the animal's stomach or this or that. But inverts, it's just done. No second chances.
It's not
Which I
just
think is something
centipedes
that,
either. It's other myropods, millipedes, even
oh yeah,
even beetles.
isopods.
Yeah, isopods. It just
I
doesn't
mean, I
work.
think even with millipedes, it might be even worse because, a big part of their diet is eating the substrate. They're like
Yeah.
worms. They decompose the matter around them. So it's definitely dangerous
Yes.
stuff.
And that's funny you should bring up millipedes. That's one of the great tragedies of the hobby, or the hobby in general. And I'll explain further on that. I actually started mainly on millipedes when A. gigas was between $5 and $15 at every freaking pet store everywhere. There was tons of these things. Everyone said put them on cocoa fiber. And you would do this and they would die left and right. You couldn't keep the dang things alive. And it was happening with Orthoporus ornatus, the giant desert millipede. You couldn't keep them alive because the suggested care was, cocoa fiber, cocoa fiber. They eat the cocoa fiber. And they die from that for sure. And to this day, I see people not taking care of Orthoporus ornatus. When somebody pays for an A. gigas these days, usually they know what they're doing. So that's not happening as much. But the Orthoporus ornatus is still $5 to $12 centipede. So plenty of people are giving incorrect care on how to keep those. Those centipedes, man, they need super, super, super dry. Cocoa fiber is like a death sentence to them instantly.
Yeah. Just going back to ornatus, I remember there was a video of yours. I think it was a cohab project between Polymorpha or what? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me about that cohabitation that I've done, and I've done that a lot in the past. Polymorpha, or what I have here, whatever it is, it's not reactive to eating those millipedes, despite people saying, oh yeah, it's going to eat the millipede. Millipedes, they do secrete a really nasty fluid, and it leaves stains on your hands, and if something tries to hurt them other than, like a human touching it, it's still going to secrete that. But centipedes don't seem to even be bothered by millipedes that have secreted this because they'll still walk by them and interact with them and eat the same stuff as the millipede and not be affected by the must if I've messed with the millipedes. So that's kind of interesting. I do believe, because I've lifted rocks here in New Mexico, and I found packs of millipedes and multiple centipedes under a huge slab together. So it's just they are living together in the wild. So yeah, I don't really see any problem with keeping them together. But anything or any time you keep multiple species together, it's very important to give a lot of room, just a lot of space, safety first.
The main worry I'd have with that is I found ornatus to be pretty protein hungry. So when the centipede is molting, yeah, that's the main concern. Not the centipede eating the millipede, but the millipede eating the centipede.
Yes, yeah. If the centipede was to molt in the vicinity of the millipede, they will happily eat a molting centipede. However, I've seen Orthoporus ornatus exhibit some aggressive behavior in the wild towards other small insects that it's already trying to eat on that appear pre-injured. It's a rare sight, but I have seen it a number of times, and they do seem to continue to go after it as the insect tries to go away. So even if the centipede tried to get away, it might be persistent to try to eat it. That is a worry. I mean, in any cohabitation setup, you should know there's going to be deaths, no matter what. Even if it's just the same species. If you have, a communal setup of a lot of centipede species that say you can be communal with them, like Rhycida, take the food away and they're not communal anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think that because normally with centipedes you feed them once a week or something like that. With communal centipedes, do you need to literally constantly have food in the cage?
Well, with my Rhycida communal setup, that was the biggest one I ever did for the longest period of time. It lasted for 2 years before it collapsed. What I did, and it worked really well, was I kept a constant supply of food in there. At all times, there was a couple different sized crickets. Now, I don't like to use simply crickets. I hate just that diet, but for that communal setup, it's what was easy for me. And it worked. I would gut load the crickets. But there was constant food, and there was a few times I went out of town and tried to leave them alone. And when I came back into town, sure enough, I would find bits of Rhycida here and there.
Man. So on a completely different topic, I wanted to kind of touch up on some taxonomy things, because I know you and a friend of all of ours, Kai, you guys are doing some phylogenetic testing, and I know you're supplying him with some specimens. What are your guys' let's say hopes for that? What do you expect to come out of it? Kind of what is your thought process?
Okay, so that was something I was touching on a second ago, and I went and grabbed a couple specimens to show you guys. I want to show you a real polymorpha. This is what was described as polymorpha. This is what keys out as polymorpha. And everyone in every state I've seen is this big or just slightly bigger. I'm going to have to get it close to the camera here. Let me see if I can get it. It's probably not going to like this, but it's too fast to just let go. So I'm going to have to hold it for a second. Sorry for the crappy footage here. There we go. So that's a blue polymorpha. These are found in California. They have fat terminal legs. This one's got about 2 molts to go, and it'll be fully grown. Now, these have the stripes on them, of course, and the original shoddy at best description or paper on polymorpha is based off of these guys right here. So aside from these, there's another centipede with stripes. Some people are calling them the NorCal asticorum. I don't have any of those right now. I used to have a very huge specimen. They've been sold as the Ghost Heroes. That's the northern white, or the southern one is just asticorum. And then there's variants in Arizona, which are Madeiran blackheads, I want to say. There's some big ones in Texas. And then there's the Rio Grande. I have a bigger female, but I'm not going to disturb her. She's molting, so we're just going to show you one of these smaller ones. And it's, in comparison, this got a lot of growing to do. You'll notice when centipedes need to grow, they have are going to grow, they have a smaller head and a very thick body. That's a good sign that they're going to get bigger. I doubt this is focusing. But yeah, she's not huge yet. They will get much bigger than this. I've seen 17 centimeters on this specimen, or not this specimen, this species pretty consistently. And so what Kai and I are kind of trying to, I guess, prove is that this and that little dinky thing are not the same species. And they're being sold as Sky Island blue polymorpha, and some people say large morph, and some people say small morph. They're not morphs. They're completely different species. They're altogether different. this taxonomically matches the Northern California Aztecorum, as they're calling them. So it's a really interesting and mixed up subject, but pretty soon I think we should have some results, not everything, but we should have some results to at least say this is not the same as the small one. So that's pretty much what we're going for. And when we do have the data we need, the species will be broken up. They won't be all called polymorpha anymore.
Yeah, but it's just going back to the actual name polymorpha means like, well, it's pretty close to many forms.
Yes.
So yeah, surely
And
they're
that's
just
not wrong. Yeah, even the small ones have many, many color forms.
yeah, it might just be like a surely it could just be a locality thing. Like if you go back to things like Scolopendra dahani, you like Vietnamese yellow leg, medium-sized centipede, compared to the Malaysian cherry reds, which get obviously quite a bit bigger. Or what's another locality of dahani that's still smaller? Yeah, any of the Vietnamese ones compared to some of the Malaysian or the giant Java and stuff like that.
So there's a lot of confusion amongst dahani. I in a cherry red, the largest photo I've ever seen, credible, was 10 inches. So in centimeters, that's like 25. Yeah, that was the largest cherry red that again I've seen. That was a credible photo. The largest credible photo of a Vietnamese yellow leg that I've ever seen, and I've consistently seen a little smaller than this, was 34 centimeters. There was a guy in China that was keeping a lot of yellow legs, and I'm sure the photos can still be found on the internet. They were all Vietnamese locals, and every single one of them got above 9 inches. And it's because they were being kept correctly. Also, wild specimens, my buddy from Vietnam, has told me a lot of wild specimens are 8 and 9 inches all day. So the stuff coming into the hobby is just like a lot of the white legs or a lot of the Gallopinensis. They're collecting smaller specimens for shipping purposes and sending smaller specimens. You're not getting big adults or breeding adults or any of that. And unfortunately, with those Vietnamese, a lot of times those are wild caught or farm specimens. If they're farm specimens, you can guarantee they have parasites and they have not been kept well. And by the time they actually get to Europe or America, they've been sitting in this little cup for 6 or 8 months, just being fed here and there and misted in the same substrate, and they're sickly, and getting them back to health is a nightmare. And so you lose a huge gap of growth right there.
Yeah. So why do you think actual captive bred dahani don't get as big as the wild ones? Like I've seen a bunch of captive bred ones staying the same sort of size as the wild farmed ones.
I think it's consistency of native range temperature. I think that a lot of people are not keeping them in the correct temperature range or the right humidity. A lot of people don't take into consideration that these centipedes are not out in the hottest part of the day. And the ones that do come out during the day are not going to be walking around in the sun or the exposed heat very long. They're going to be going to the leaf litter. So a lot of temperatures are either kept too high or in some cases far too low. That's why the jewels, for instance, weren't surviving for a lot of people. They need a really stable, temperature all the time. So I think that if you follow everything to the T from their native range, taking into consideration if they're arboreal or if they're a terrestrial animal, you'll probably get a captive bred specimen that would get as big. But unfortunately, captive bred specimens are never going to see exact conditions of where they came from. The Giganti, the Gallopinensis, none of those get as big if they're captive bred.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just that's got to come down to habitat. One person had a theory that it was inbreeding, but even these specimens that are not inbred from two different specimens that are wild caught, they're not getting as big. Now, I've talked to a guy in China that he had an ethmostigmus, a blue ring. I didn't think these things could get above 6 inches, and he had an 8-incher. And he said he was feeding it fish food, sacred food. And so maybe it's diet. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the general consensus here is that Scolopendra alternans, well, what's called the Florida locale, even though they're found throughout the islands and around that sort of area. The general consensus here is that they're a small centipede. When you've shown me specimens that get 8 inches plus.
Oh yeah. Yeah, alternans is a rather large centipede. I have one, or I have pictures of one. I have a full-size orange next to it, and she is just gargantuan next to that orange. There was a lot of confusion originally over her collection site. She was allegedly a Dominican one, so from Haitian. She was a Haitian giant.
Yeah.
But then another person told me that she was imported out of Puerto Rico. And sure enough, there is a centipede in Puerto Rico that's getting mislabeled as Gigante. You might have seen the reports of Gigante being in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
I don't know that there actually is Gigante in Puerto Rico. I think that these alternans were getting called Gigante. And it's because, like the one I had, I mean, she was massive. She was the same size as an adult female Gallipanensis. She was every bit as wide, and she was every bit as long.
Are there any actual true Gigante actually out of Venezuela, though? Like anywhere else?
That's a good question. Are there any Gigante even in Venezuela? Is that centipede even Gigante? I think that a lot more work needs to be done all around on all those centipedes. I think that people need to look up what the original holotype was for the Gigante description, go to that site, collect that centipede, do phylogenetic work on it, and then say this is Gigante, and then test all the other centipedes that are in South America and decide whether or not they're Gigante or something else. That's the only way that's ever going to figure it out. I don't think Gallipanensis is Gallipanensis. But that's a can of worms that people hate getting into.
Yeah, especially like a lot of controversy going around with the what was Scolopendra robusta. Mm-hmm. People now referring to it as Scolopendra galapagos orange form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two centipedes, I've always said that they're very similar. There is one major difference that I noticed. It's more prevalent in the smaller specimens. There is a median kill present, which a group of people in Germany, I won't name who, decided to take advantage of that a number of years ago and say, oh, it has a median kill. That means it's Veriticornis. We're going to sell it for $600. And so they did. And some people fell for it. But the median kill on the Robusta, it smooths out as it ages. It's not like Veriticornis. Veriticornis, it stays its whole life. On Robusta, it just flattens out. And all you can see left of it is a little triangle on the very last segment when they're adults. But the Gallipanensis don't have this median kill.
Yeah. What actually really shocks me is that no one's gone and described Scolopendra species whiteleg. I mean, they're probably the most iconic centipede in the Hobbit League.
They certainly are. Back when I first started, everyone was convinced that was a Gigante. Yeah. But the holotype Gigante does not match that even a little bit. So that's definitely not a Gigante. You know what whiteleg reminds me of? Ben, have you ever kept a Scolopendra Heros?
I've wanted Heros for the longest time, but no, I haven't kept one. They do remind me of them though. They're long, leggy centipedes compared to a short, stocky build of Giganti or
Yeah, so with the white legs, of course, being a South American giant, they're a bit slower behaving than the heroes. But the heroes have a lot of similarities, as in they seem to be more, I guess they're making more intentional movements. They know what they're doing. They have a plan in mind for where they're going and what they want to do. And that's another neat thing about Alternads. I think Alternads is another very aware centipede. But Alternans tends to be on the docile side when they get big, but jumpy when they're young, just like the white legs.
Yeah. They're both very iconic centipedes. Obviously, thanks to a certain someone putting a video out on Scolopendra heros. That bite report just, it really gets on my nerves.
Yeah. Which one? I know exactly who you're talking about. You know, there's a funny story about that. A long time ago, that particular YouTuber we're talking about, when he was a smaller YouTuber and I was also a very small YouTuber. I've never been a giant one by any means. I don't really have much of a following. But I commented on this video he did, and I said, you should use a Scolopendra Heroes to have it envenomate you because you've done all these other ones. And I see you have people help you with this, and I'll help you. I'll supply you with the Scolopendra Heroes. I'll show you how to do it safely so you don't hurt the centipede. And we can make some great footage for you. And these were comments on his page. And maybe if you look hard enough, you can still find this conversation. It happened circa 2015. And he replied to me in a rather arrogant manner. He criticized me for saying Scolopendra Heroes. He said, why don't you just use the common name? And man, I can't even remember at this point. He said something that got me heated though. And it was about basically, they're using the common name instead of the Latin name, and that there's no way that that could top a bullet ant. And I then listed off Dehania and all these other ones. I said use Heroes because it's safe, and you could use Spinosystema or a Ryu Giant. But anyway, he was just very rude about it. And funny enough, in a number of months, like 5 months later, boom, a Scolopendra Heroes video of him getting bit and then screaming and crying. He's got to go to the hospital because it's so bad. And that was just a really unpleasant experience for me because all my friends sent me that video the day it came out. And they thought I would be enthused by it, of course, because in my real life, nobody knows I do this. In my real life, I drive race cars. I do autocross. I have a race car shop, and I plumb. I'm a plumber. So nobody knows I do the centipede stuff. So they sent me the centipede stuff because they've seen a picture here and there of my pet centipedes. And it just made me so mad that he posted this, and it's getting 1 million views. But I found now, good for him. It's unfortunate how he treated that centipede. I hated how rough he was in that video. And it's quite silly that he could talk to me like that and act like I was dumb for suggesting that video and using a scientific name, yet he goes and does make that video afterwards. So that's my little story about that YouTuber.
Yeah. And I think what happened in the video is that he made his personal fear. He made that override the facts he gave. I wouldn't say scared, but I'm certainly cautious around a lot of my centipedes. But I won't let that get in the way of what I'm putting out, because at the end of the day, my social media platform is about these animals, and if you're not spreading good information, what are you really doing? You're creating fear. And Yeah, I think bite reports, in a way, are good for dispelling the fear if you show that they're not as bad as most people make them out to be. But also, if you do it badly, it could be pretty dangerous for the hobby.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a big, I guess it's, I'm not going to say assumption, there's a knowledge that the South American giants have weaker venom. One thing that nobody takes into consideration before they take an envenomation from a South American giant is that a South American giant can dump about 6 times the venom of your regular 6 or 7 inch centipede.
Yeah,
So even with weaker venom, you're getting a whole lot more of it.
yeah. I remember. I remember with a Heros, one of my friends got bitten, trying to actually point out how bad the video on that Coyote Peterson brought out, and this centipede actually gave them extreme necrosis in the area. It was one of the worst bites I'd ever seen. I think what a lot of people don't think is that maybe these centipedes aren't using their full amount of venom with these bites. Like you see a lot of lots of mixed reviews, especially with the white legs, the Galaps, Scolopendra heros, and stuff like that, with people saying this centipede is really bad or it's extremely mild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's there's tons of mixed reviews, and you're right. It is because centipedes are not always delivering full amounts of venom. Sometimes during self-envenomation, I would do it on the hands, right on the top of my fingers. And the reason I would do that is because this is going to cause a lot of damage because, as I said earlier, you don't have a lot of tissue to help absorb that venom. So if I do it here, my antibodies are going to build up and react a lot better than if I'm doing it somewhere that it's not going to affect my body as bad and negatively. But centipedes during self-envenomation don't always give me their venom. I sometimes can't get them to dump venom in at all. It's a nightmare. So sometimes people think they got a real bad bite, but they're like, oh, it's not that bad. That's just because the centipede didn't dump all of that. Dehani are one of those ones. It can be really mild or it can be terrible. Dehani is the one I use to self-envenomate because I had a very bad Dehani bite. It was my first envenomation ever. And man, it was incredible. And to this day, even after rattlesnake envenomation, the Dehani pain, and it was under my fingernail, the Dehani pain was so much worse, it seemed like, than the rattlesnake pain. The rattlesnake pain was like a tightness because there was so much swelling on my first rattlesnake envenomation. It was just so fat. It just felt like it was stretching my skin out. So that's where a lot of that pain came from.
Yeah.
But the centipede pain is actually, nerve pain. But yeah.
I was lucky. I was extremely lucky with my facial bite that it wasn't a full envenomation. I have since had a few full envenomations. Oh, she's gonna bite me.
Giving you a taste.
But I've had a few full envenomations from Dehani since then. Luckily, in just pretty decent areas on my arm, on my legs. But they're easy centipedes to interact with, apart from when they just decide to bite out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're fun to interact with because they keep me on edge.
Yeah, I used to be weary of handling Dehani, and it's because my first envenomation from a Dehani was so bad. And a lot of the ones I interacted with were jumpy because they were younger specimens. And I found if you are afraid, it makes handling centipedes so much harder. If you have any worry about a bite, like there was a great question I got the other day. When do you know it's safe to handle a centipede? It's safe to handle a centipede as soon as you're ready to get envenomated. That's when it's safe. Yeah. And so a lot of people, they don't take that into consideration. We'll do a self-envenomation here. I typically do it right on the finger, right there. And
Yeah.
see, he's dumping in pretty good. So, yeah. But anyways, yeah, I tell people if you're not ready to get bit, then you probably shouldn't hold your centipede.
Yeah.
Now, centipedes, they do envenomate out of nowhere, but usually you got to force them to envenomate you.
Yeah.
And just, I'll show you guys on the video, that wasn't a dry bite. He did a really good pump and dump right there. Dehani can cause some serious secondary effects, which a lot of other centipedes don't. Usually it happens when you get a finger envenomation at the tip. It can cause hardening of your skin and the flesh around that area because it does destroy a lot of the flesh. Cherry red has a really bad effect. I've seen scars caused by cherry reds. I haven't had a scar caused by a centipede, but I've personally seen envenomations that left scars. He won't go back in the cup now.
These centipede venom actually fascinates me though. It's so much more complex than we give it credit for.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of medical uses that are not being investigated, I guess, with centipede venom, and it's a shame, man. This is really interesting. I had severe damage in one of my fingers, this finger actually, that I did the self-envenomation in. I got an envenomation from 6 to 7 foot Crotalus atrox on my hand. And that's the one that I was telling you about. They wanted to cut my arm off for this envenomation, but that's a story for another day. But after that, the joint was damaged really bad right here, and the hand was hunched over, and I couldn't pop the knuckle. And this lasted for a very, very long time. Now, somebody said you need to do a Hottentotta envenomation. I know it's not a centipede, it's a scorpion. But me and at the Inverts Kingdom, we did this video together. He brought over some Hottentotta, and I took 8 Hottentotta hits right on that finger that was damaged. They hurt pretty bad. But the next morning I woke up, and I'm not kidding you, my knuckle popped, and I had almost full movement in it. And that just shows you, and I know it's from the venom. I know it's from the venom. You know, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a venom scientist. I'm not a toxicologist, anything like that. But I know that that was from that self-envenomation. There's no way that my knuckle being damaged like it was would have healed itself overnight miraculously.
Yeah, I just got a bite from the white leg.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, well, but yeah, that's pretty hot. This is my first time. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, I've got to go actually. So I'm really sorry for cutting this short, but
it's okay. Yeah. It's nice and hot, man. Oh, hey, let me tell you how to take care of that real quick to get the most venom out. Okay. I got the stuff ready right here. If you have this at your house, not kidding you, man. If you got minute rice, just like this, or any sort of rice, if you don't have minute rice, regular rice works. This is better. Take a shot glass like this. Rinse that finger in really hot water right now. Yeah. Then soak it for 1 minute in hot, like as hot as you can handle in the hot water in that cup. Okay, empty that out. And then while your finger's still wet and the cup's still wet, get all this rice and pour it in there and pack it really tight all the way around the finger. It'll help absorb the venom. I'm not kidding. Keep it held on there. Keep your finger in the cup for the next 4 hours. It should take it all out.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, thank you. Yep. Have a good day. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that was it. I have other centipedes to show. I don't have any hosts left here. So we'll just take a look at some centipedes real quick. We're almost at an hour. I'll cut it off here a little after that. Okay. So this is a Scolopendra alternans. Of course, this is one of the ones they're calling longipes from Florida. I think that paper was rejected, so it's back to alternans. These behave very different in comparison to a lot of centipedes. They have slower, more controlled movements, and they push their body against your hands as you hold them. It's pretty interesting. So they really make themselves feel tucked against your hand, and they're all kind of like that. Another one we got that's a little different. Scolopendra heroes. Those behave a lot differently than the Dayhani. Oh, this isn't the heroes, is it? No. This is the Dayhani. We're going to pop it out anyway. The Dayhani, everyone knows those. Nice, somewhat aggressive centipedes, but again, you know, they're handleable and all that. This one's my male. He's bred for me. Very nice specimen. Put him down on there's the hero, so I forgot. I put it in a different cup. Gotta get that Dayhani back in the cup. The Heros is right here. This one was sold to me as a male. This is a good instance. It was supposed to be a male, but it is a female. Very cool centipede. Look at that envenomation. That Dayhani really got me good. It pumped all it had in there. Look, my finger's even getting a little fat. It's pretty neat. Oh, I almost wanted to jump there. Well, anyways, everyone check in on Ben. Make sure he's okay. Those white leg hits, when they actually do envenomate, ooh, it's hot. It really hurts. So it's just because, like I said before, they're really big. So they dump a lot of venom. It's not necessarily more potent than Dayhani, but it doesn't feel good. So we'll make sure he's okay after this. But I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for watching. Go check me out on YouTube. It's Thepurelife, capital T, capital P, capital L, or on Instagram, of course, which is Mike's House of 1,000 Legs. It used to be the Centipede Whisperer, but I've lost access to that account. So if you do follow me on the Centipede Whisperer, go check out my new page. Again, it's Mike's House of 1,000 Legs, underscores in between each of those. You guys have a wonderful day, and maybe if they have me on the show again, I'll see you guys again.